Donald Trump reaffirms the tariffs. Alberta gets a tax cut. The GDP gap between the US and Canada grows wider, and the Liberals hash it out in the first of the Liberal leadership debates. I'm Jim Check. You're watching Kelowna Now. With me, Ian Burns, managing editor from Ottawa there. Ready to go?
Howdy ho.
There you go. So the big thing, Trump said he's moving forward with those tariffs on Canada and Mexico next week. So that was the big part of the debate too. But yeah, so he's not letting up on that stuff. You know, a lot of people thinking, myself included, that maybe he's just pressuring and playing with us. But he says these tariffs are a go next week.
Yeah, I mean, are they? Are they though? I heard him say that live at the time I was actually watching that, and I just shook my head. It's like, at this point, how can you even pretend that what he says corresponds to reality? It's like, even during that same press conference, he kept talking about how he's like, all I do is make deals. I'm the best deal maker ever. Some say ever. It's kind of like that's what he's doing. He's trying to push some kind of deal, and this is like a weird kind of threat that he seems to just want to hang over Canada's head forever. And then obviously alongside that is the annexation thing, which maybe that's on the cards over the next sort of 80 years or something like that. But I don't know. Again, I don't know how serious he is about that either.
We did a good interview. Ken Mulgat was out there at the university and talking to an economist there, a professor, and saying that even if the tariffs do come, for Canada to do a tit for tat thing would not be a good idea. That would actually just punish Canadians. That we should just kind of because what Trump's going to do is actually increase prices for Americans, and why would we want to do the same thing to Canadians?
Yeah, well, there's a story going around now about I think the CBC had a version of it up there, which is about some specific some metal beam that Canada sources almost entirely from the US to build houses, and how even just the threat of tariffs now is kind of worrying people. And well, obviously there are some tariffs in place, we should say, for steel and aluminium. But I mean, if that's just one example where almost every single one of these you know, necessary items is sourced from the US. So if we put tariffs on them, then that's just going to make the housing crisis worse. And then that is just one example, of so many where we would kind of shoot ourselves in the foot.
Yeah, and the tough part for me is watching. Like yesterday, President Emmanuel Macron from France was there at the White House, and like Donald Trump was talking to him and saying, how France and the United States have been best of friends and the best of friends. And I'm just like, excuse me, we've been next door, shoulder to shoulder with you guys forever, and seems like Japan's their best friends, Italy's their best friends, everybody's their best friends except for Canada seems to be getting the like the ex-girlfriend kind of scenario from Trump.
Yeah, being snubbed. I mean, it's an undeniable fact that the Trump administration has been friendlier and more complimentary towards Vladimir Putin of Russia and Russia in general than Canada and Canada's leader. That is quite insane, isn't it? It's quite insane that that's true, but it is true. I
But
mean,
on the yeah, no, go ahead.
I just no, we've had this conversation many times, and I've said this many times. I don't know what he's trying to achieve. I really don't understand because, and then there's obviously this very damaging article out there about how Canada's apparently being considered as a candidate to be expelled from the Five Eyes intelligence group, which again is just so nuts. It just kind of none of this makes sense. I mean, it's almost like he's trying to damage the United States because that's the only consequence of this
Yeah,
is to damage the US.
and
And
just
I don't know, it's like he does have a famously small circle of people many of whom are not particularly respected individuals, to put it lightly. I don't know if he's just being fed garbage by mediocre people and he's just like, all right, I'll have some of that. I don't know if that's the truth, if it's just as simple as that, or if this is like a lot more complex and a lot sort of smarter than any of us realize. and this is all part of his master plan to annex Canada. I mean, I just it's impossible to say, but on the face of it, it really does look very, very stupid, doesn't it?
Yeah, the Five Eyes security thing, it involves the nations of Canada, the United States, the United Kingdom, Australia, and New Zealand, just for information. We always try to get you to learn something when you're watching the show, so you don't go away just with getting angry about something. You also be, have something that you can say, hey, I know what that is.
And infamously, Canada contributes the least and is considered to be the most leaky, the most risky of the. Well, actually, no. New Zealand is actually considered to be the loser of that pack, but Canada's the next one. So I guess it could just be another shot across the bows with like defense spending, where and it's say like sort it out, stop being so start like contributing more or something. Maybe it's that, but again, it's so stupid to do that, isn't it? Something as sensitive as intelligence, but that's Trump.
And and here's some more conflicting information. So Trump coming out and says he wants that Keystone XL pipeline built, and he wants it built now, because that was one of the things the Biden administration nixed on day one when their administration came into power. And here's his tweet, and then Danielle Smith retweeted it, and she says agreed the project should never been canceled. Lower fuel costs for American families. So Danielle Smith, seeming to being on the receiving end of that good news. And I mean, the problem with that pipeline, I mean, all pipelines would be good, I think. But the problem with that one is that it serves the same customer that we're having trouble with, as opposed to the East-West pipeline or the Northern Gateway pipeline, where we could access other markets.
Yeah, I mean, if it's a question of where if we have limited resources and we have to choose where to put the money, so to speak, I mean, that would be one to avoid probably, wouldn't it? Because the Americans are unreliable and occasionally they have these weird sort of hysterias, don't they? And these kind of national seizures where they elect somebody like Donald Trump, and that makes them very, very dangerous and unreliable. So the best thing that we could do is get as far away from them as we can in terms of trade.
Yeah, but again, on the other side of that, any pipeline getting Alberta oil and gas to market is a great thing for Canada. Because again, we talked about that yesterday. The GDP map of Canada, Alberta Energy, the number one provider of wealth for Canada, bar none.
Yep, even though it's all goes to the Americans at a cut price because of as Donald Trump will tell you, the previous American leaders have been so stupid, so spectacularly dumb, and they've arranged these really stupid deals with Canada, apparently, according to him, even though the evidence is in front of your eyes that the Americans get oil on the cheap because of how they've arranged the energy system of North America.
Yeah. Uh, but on that note, Alberta's Danielle Smith delivering on a tax cut. She said that Albertans will get, those earning about 60,000 or more a year will get a tax cut. That means about $760 per individual, or about $1,500 for a family. And that tax cut is not a one-year thing, it's an every year thing. And right after British Columbia came out and said that promised $1,000 grocery rebate that BC NDP promised that would be immediate has now been nixed. And here is Alberta delivering on a tax cut that that will be meaningful to Albertans.
Yeah, I mean, I think it just represents a philosophical divide. Roughly where the Rockies are. There's a philosophical divide, isn't there? In BC, they are much more like statist. That's the only word for it. They're much more big government. They're much more socialist. And in Alberta, they believe in the freedom of the individual and kind of Milton Friedman style economics. They want to get the money into the consumers. Like they want to give money back. They don't want to hoard as much as possible. And that's just a philosophical difference, I think. So I would say you're just going to keep seeing this, really, unless BC has some kind of revolution and, elects like John Rustad or something.
So that's the biggest tax break for Albertans since the former Premier Ralph Klein. And I don't know if you remember Ralph Klein, that he was a boisterous kind of guy too, and he made a lot of changes in Alberta. And some of them, he actually did a lot of things that are happening in the United States right now. Like he was taking away dowries from universities, and he was basically cutting government, and he did a lot of things in Alberta. Some of them made him quite popular, and some of them made him unpopular with a lot of people as well.
He was a journalist, wasn't he?
Yeah, Ralph. Yeah, I know he got himself in trouble one night when he had one too many refreshments, and I think he threw $20 in the face. I think it was like, I mean, this story is old. I think threw $20 in the face of a homeless person and told him to get a job or something like that.
You can't do that, can you?
No, but like I said, he was a very famous, kind of like a Rob Ford in a way. You know what I mean? Remember the old Rob Ford? Very, very outspoken as well.
You mean the Toronto mayor?
Mayor, yeah, Doug Ford's brother.
Yeah, the now deceased former mayor of Toronto.
That's right. Anyway, Albertans getting a tax cut. British Columbians not. The
Probably the
university.
opposite, I would say. Probably a
What's that?
tax increase.
The University of Calgary economist says real GDP per capita in the U.S. 43% higher than in Canada in 2023, and in 24, the estimate that to go to 50%. So this divergence just continues to get bigger and bigger. So that is not good. Let that sink in, I guess. The U.S. is on track to produce nearly 50% more than Canada will per person.
Yeah, and it's largely down to investment, I would say. The Americans have been really investing a lot in their economy, and it's also the nature of their economy, I guess, where they grow a lot quicker, don't they? And they adapt to new technologies a lot quicker
Well,
because they can just fire people en masse
they're
and
they're
they have that turnover.
they're attracting a lot of investment into the United States right now, including Apple. Tim Cook, CEO, says that they're going to invest half $500 million in the United States.
Half a trillion, maybe? Is that what you mean?
Let's just check that number. I mean, maybe I got that
Because
number.
half a billion is like chicken feed these days,
Yeah,
isn't
yeah, I
it? That
think
wouldn't even
it
be
might
a
be a
news
half a
story.
trillion. If I let's have a
But
quick
yeah, I
look.
mean, it's also energy, isn't it? There's been this shale revolution in the United States that's taken place over the last 20 years or so has been it's been truly revolutionary. And that's when you see this divergence occur, and it's not even primarily between Canada and the US, it's primarily between the US and Europe. That's where the real where it becomes really apparent because the Europeans have been extraordinarily stupid and short-sighted when it comes to energy, and now they're in a very deep hole of their own making. Whereas the United States has been very sort of sensible and provident when it comes to energy. Now they're the world's largest energy producer, and they're rolling around in money. So I mean, there are so many lessons to learn from this, but yeah, the fact of this divergence is now almost it's so obvious, isn't it, that it's kind of penetrating now into like the public mind and the public consciousness. And I think it's going to become more and more of a political issue.
Yeah, that number is it's so big. Like, it's 500 billion. It's a $500 billion that Apple's going to invest to build an AI server factory in Texas, and jobs, and what it's going to create for Americans. I mean, the AI world is huge in the United States right now with what Microsoft is doing, what Apple's going to do, what, like X is doing, what OpenAI is doing. All these companies are investing huge, and we've seen, like they're investing in nuclear energy, all kinds of investment. And that was one of the things that Trump said: if you have a lot of money to invest it, I'll take away the regulation, you get lower taxes. So a lot of capital fleeing to the United States, and not good for Canada in that respect either, right? And we're having a tough time getting a lot of projects off the ground, and it's been so many projects have been stymied here in Canada over the past 10 years. And again, I put a story on my LinkedIn there that shows you all the projects that have been stopped. Actually, you put it up on Kelowna Now yesterday. All the projects that have been halted in Canada that
Yep.
would contribute billions and billions of dollars to Canada's GDP.
And they were all halted at the time that the Americans went gung ho, went all in on shale and all the rest of it. And, it's not a coincidence that America is doing so well and has also been saying yes to a lot of energy projects.
You know,
Those two things are very closely related.
there was a time when Canada's GDP per capita was higher and our wages were higher than the Americans, and it's just the last little while, it's just been going the wrong way.
What's possibly even more shocking to hear is that there was once a time not that long ago when Britain had a higher GDP per capita than the United States. I mean, can you believe that? Britain, which is now basically devolved into a middle income country. But not that long ago, about 20 years ago, even the British were
Yeah.
theoretically richer than the Americans. I mean, but that's to an extent, that just reveals how ridiculous the GDP measure actually is, because GDP sort of counts debt and things like that, doesn't it? It counts a lot of really sort of it counts a lot of numbers as wealth that shouldn't really be counted as wealth, you know, like it's not exactly hard industry. And obviously the British had a lot of funny money in the City of London, and that all went to pot with the financial crash 2007, and that's when their GDP per capita declined. So it's quite
And
hard to make sense of that, but I think Canada's certainly was based on resources, wasn't it? So that was
yeah,
actual real wealth.
for
And that
sure.
really was true that Canada, like famously, Canada had the richest middle class in the world. There were like a lot of people that, you know, it was like it was one of those stories that like the Financial Times and the Economist were obsessed about, weren't they? They were like, always talking about how's Canada done this? Like, look how smart the Canadians are. It was a real like phenomenon.
Yeah, you know, it was a time when the mills were milling, and the oil pumps were pumping, and the miners were mining, and everything was going. You know, and there was a lot of really good paying jobs and a lot of wealth that was being created, and that's not happening. It was like not too recently, not too long ago, the Canadian dollar was higher than the American dollar. I think it was $1.10, and that was under the Harper government.
Yeah. Well, it just shows that it shows that it's possible. And I mean, that also doesn't even factor in a lot of the kind of intangibles associated with when you say things like quality of life. When you look at that, I would say that except for the lack of heat, the quality of life in Canada is in general probably higher than in the US because of all of the madness that they have to deal with. And that's also true with Europe. So for that to have been the case, a higher quality of life sort of anyway, but then also a more valuable currency and also a higher GDP per capita. I mean, those were really, really sunny days, weren't they?
I think that maybe another way to look at it is because when Canada was banging on all cylinders, and you know our resource sector was going, that we were all kind of like thinking everything was great, and then we've been living off of the fatted calf for the past 10 years without feeding the calf, and now all of a sudden the calf looks pretty gaunt, and there's not a lot of beef left on the bone there.
Yeah. Well, I mean, this has happened across the West. I think they've taken wealth for granted, a lot of these societies, and I think that's certainly true about Canada. Yeah. And you know, the wealth was created and enjoyed, and then around about 2015, I can't remember off the top of my head what happened in 2015 in Canada, but something must have happened about that time. And that was the kind of, okay, we've got all this money, now let's spend it.
Yeah,
And what it was spent on was, in many cases, moral gestures.
there was a
Like,
lot of the priority
let's
shifted
be green and let's give loads of money to everyone. Let's fix everything with all this money.
and gave away money to many different countries and stuff like too. That we became basically like you know like there was the hard workers that had earned all the money, and then all of a sudden the person won the lottery, and all of a sudden they were handing out the dough like it was do re mi.
Yeah, and Mark Carney, among many other people, has been articulating this critique of the Trudeau government, which is that maybe there wasn't enough focus on the economy and on the generation of wealth. And that's come from Mark Carney, who's a very close ally and associate of Justin Trudeau's, a great defender of Justin Trudeau and colleague. He has even come out and said, "Yeah, we made a mistake there. We didn't focus enough on the sort of creation of wealth, and we should have." And you know, he has pledged that he will do that.
And then here's one: a petition created by a BC woman calls on Justin Trudeau to revoke billionaire Elon Musk's Canadian citizenship, and it's garnered about 200,000 signatures. And my warning to people is like if you can do a petition to get rid of it, you have to be really careful, because then if there'll be none so many petitions going out there trying to get rid of other people. And then, sure enough, there's now one to revoke Mark Carney's citizenship. That's now at 16,000 signatures. So these are dangerous things. Revoking someone's citizenship because of the will of the mob doesn't really seem like a good way to do anything.
It also kind of, I mean, Chrystia Freeland yesterday as well was was talking about the 100% tariffs on Teslas to try and punish Elon Musk as a way of trying to get Donald Trump's attention. I feel like it's ultimately, if you kind of cut away from all the politics of it and all the kind of like chit chat, it just looks a bit kind of pathetic, doesn't it? It's like, is that the best that we can do? Target one man. It doesn't strike confidence in me as a subject of the Canadian government that they've got this in hand, that they're doing the right thing. It's that they're strong. They don't seem strong if they're talking about attacking Elon Musk, who's just one man ultimately.
Uh, and let's talk about the Liberal leadership race. That happened. The French debate happened last night. The English one goes tonight. Quite a few stumbles in the debate in the English language, causing some trouble. Or sorry, the French language causing some trouble for Mark Carney. He made some stumbles there, and I think CBC tried to cover for that, where he said he's with Hamas and stuff like that. I think he stumbled there. But the opening remarks, like you were just talking about, Chrystia Freeland's opening remarks, like they all got 90 seconds, was really puzzling. And her opening remark was like, I spoke with a 4-year-old, and the 4-year-old asked me how they're going to stop the invasion of Trump. I mean, one, you're speaking to a 4-year-old and getting advice to run the country. And then two, I don't think Donald Trump's going to be rolling the tanks into Canada. Even though he's tormenting us like he wants to. I don't think that ever crossed his mind. But I mean, it just seems to be really pushing a lot of fear about being invaded now.
Yeah, she also said he presents the most serious threat since the Second World War, which seems a little bit bananas, doesn't it? Considering there were Nazi ships off the eastern coast of Canada that were regularly sinking Canadian shipping. I mean, I don't think the Americans are going to sink our ships anytime
No,
soon,
I think
frankly.
it's, but I think that I shouldn't say a lot, some of the Liberals definitely really love to dial up the rhetoric and cause fear for Canadians, and they've done this for the past, like COVID was one of those things when they were driving fear into the minds of Canadians, and it is a tactic that has worked for them, and it is working for them right now. That's how Carney's rising in the polls. They're driving a lot of fear.
Yeah, I mean, you can't argue with the results, can you? It's really working out for them. At least if the polls are to be believed. I mean, we always should emphasize that the polls are often wrong and
I
they're
don't
often
think.
accused of being biased in some way or another. But still, I mean, it does, just in my own personal experience, which I actually trust more than polls a lot of the time. In my own personal experience, people are starting to come out of the closet a bit about and say that they're liberals again and that they like Mark Carney. So I mean, and a lot of that is to do with Donald Trump and these
Yeah.
this sort of, if you want to call it rhetoric, I suppose, about Donald Trump in the US.
I don't think anybody that is serious, though, believes that the Americans are going to invade Canada. Like, I mean, that's kind of just like a nuts on another level.
Yeah, that seems just purely to be completely honest. I know Canada doesn't have much of a military right now, so I don't think it could resist militarily. But I think the Canadian people could resist in a sort of guerrilla war, and it would cost the Americans, God
Yeah,
knows how, millions of people would die, I think, if they really
I,
tried to do that. So
I,
just purely on that point, they're not going to do it because they couldn't do it, or they couldn't do it without losing a god awful number of people.
I think
But
they'd
I think what
actually.
he has said is he wants economic force. He wants to do
Yeah.
an economic invasion, an economic takeover, and that seems to be what he is actually doing.
I think you would have enough Americans that would be upset about an invasion of Canada. They might cause their own revolution, right? So I think those are just,
Yeah,
again,
there's that too. Yeah.
nut bar kind of like, and it's really kind of sad that a leader, a person that wants to be a leader of Canada, would push out those types of things to Canadians, and the ones that are, like gullible enough to believe it, that that is a real threat. The real threat is an economic threat, 100%. That is a real threat. Them invading us with tanks and stuff like that is just ludicrous, and you can't believe in society at all if you believe in that.
Yeah. Though I think what Christy Freeland was trying to say there was that Trump has been very irresponsible by the way he's speaking, in that he's scaring little 4-year-olds who don't realize that America isn't actually going to invade with tanks. I would say that,
Well,
but I mean, having said that though, there are people that aren't 4 years old that are actually trying to suggest that
yeah.
that this could be a military invasion, and they're trying to use language like Freeland, talking about the Second World War, language that is very much associated with military force and a military threat to Canada. And I think, yeah, that is quite irresponsible, isn't it?
So, so in the other parts of that debate there, it seemed like it was like there was three people that were just having like a dinner party, like they're all kind of like really quite cordial with each other. And then there was Frank, quite mild-mannered Frank Bayless there, who was, he did mention that the GST holiday was a bad idea. But even Chrystia Freeland, in her resignation letter, said that it was nothing more than a political gimmick. Yet they didn't really take it to task too much, right? I think one of the
Yeah, they didn't really like Frank, did they? But he got a couple of snarky comments. Karina Gould gave him one because he said he was talking about AI, and he was saying, because he's actually worked in business, he actually has
yeah.
experience of doing things in the world outside of the public sector. And I think Karina Gould, who's obviously like the youngest candidate, doesn't really have any experience in anything at all other than being a Liberal Party activist. So I think she took that to heart, and she came out and she was like, "Well, if you only knew what it was like to actually be in charge of a government department, you would know that AI is used in everything." It's kind of like that was probably about the sharpest comment in the whole debate, I would say. But Frank was talking about pipelines, he was saying we need to build them all. He was very pro-business, and I think the others didn't really agree on that in the same way. And the other three kind of had their own little clique going on, and Frank was kind of on the outside.
And then they got their wish. They could even CBC said they didn't want one of the commentators on there, I should say, didn't want Ruby Dalla in there to make a circus of it, and they figured out a way not to have her in the in there to make a circus, because she would have actually added some energy to the debate, and she would have been challenging Mark Carney, and that's, I think, one of the things they were worried about, because she was definitely, she is definitely like Frank on on another level, like about a 10, where Frank is maybe like a 2 there.
Well, it would have been an actual
Debate?
it would have been pluralistic, and it would have been a debate, yeah, rather than, I mean, I stopped counting the amount of times that they said I agree, or in some cases I completely agree. That was just every single utterance from all of these people was basically those words. Everything they said began with that. Oh, I completely agree with you, Christian. It was like that. It
Yeah.
wasn't very democratic. Democracy is supposed to be different viewpoints being expressed, and it can sometimes be a little bit explosive, dare we say. That's kind of the point. That's what it's like. People hold very different opinions. But I mean, they were just slapping themselves on the back. They were saying like, look how civilized we are, and look how well behaved we are. We're not like that Polyev demon who blah 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 blah. It was very much like
Well, they
self-congratulatory.
did they
So
did
I think they
pick
were
two
proud of themselves.
they did pick two demons out of there. They picked Trump and Polyev as their demons, and then it seemed like, like there's a lot of talk on the internet that this is just all show, that they've already decided who's going to win, and that these are just all the window dressing, and it didn't look like they were actually campaigning against each other. It looked like they were all kind of in on it, and Frank was the only person that didn't get the memo, I think. Let's be frank.
Yeah, let's be frank. Yeah, but I mean, yeah, he was the only voice of he was at all points the only voice of kind of an alternative view. He was the only alternative voice. But it was also very interesting. Just you mentioned the demon of Trump and Polyev. He referred Mark Carney, I think it was Mark Carney, referred to Polyev as an emperor at one point. Did you see that bit? Where it's like he went up to Nunavut like an emperor, and he said, "We're going to build a military base," and then left. I just thought that was such a curious thing to say to refer to
It's
Polyev as an emperor.
Yeah, I mean that's the been the MO of Justin Trudeau trying to stick a lot of hate on Pierre Poilievre by like using Trump's name as a slur. And I mean a lot of people say like maybe like this negative reaction from Trump to Canada is a lot of the stuff that's been said about him for the past 4 years too. So
Yeah. And I think another, just one last thing to mention about those debates is the way that they kind of deferred and fawned over Quebec. I mean, Quebec was almost like ever present as a topic of discussion, and it was given special treatment throughout that entire debate in a way that I could just never in a million years imagine British Columbia or Alberta or Ontario being treated. It was treated as though, as though it was kind of it was like a fundamental issue for the whole of Canada. Like we have to give things to Quebec. We have to talk about the French language. We have to defer to Quebec on pipelines and things. It was just, but that's the Liberal Party, isn't it? I mean, in many ways, it is the kind of political wing of the Quebecois, the Quebec people. Really, it's the kind. It is their party, and it kind of exists to advance their interests, and that really showed, I think, in that debate yesterday.
yeah, and somebody just pointed out that Carney's using some of Pierre Poilievre's policies, and that's maybe helping him win over some people too, because he has, the GST holiday on, or the GST, I shouldn't say holiday, the GST break on new homes makes a lot of sense, and that was one of Pierre's platform points, and Carney says that he would use that, and scrapping the carbon tax would have been Poilievre's fight for a long time, but they're just going to shift it, and climate change was a big topic there for sure. But I would say this before I the French debate was a little tough for a lot of people because I think other than like they stumbled with the French language. Even though they talked about so much about Quebec, they stumbled with the French language. And the English debate goes tonight, so then you'll see them more, and they won't be able to blame it on the language for stumbling.
Yeah, and I wonder if they're still so deferent towards Quebec and say, "Oh no, we absolutely must continue with cash transfers to Quebec." Obviously, that's what that means. Equalization has basically always meant that, hasn't it? And they kept saying, "Yeah, yeah, we've got to keep getting the health transfers. We've got to keep giving cash to Quebec." Like, let's see if they talk like that in English. That would
It'll be
that
interesting
would
to
be
see.
very
Like tonight's
interesting to read.
debate, I think will be for the like the Ontario West people a little more understandable because it was tougher for sure to get when they're interrupting each other for the person that's doing the translating to get that information out. Uh,
Yeah. But sorry, one very last thing. You mentioned somebody said something about stealing policies or what have you, and then
yeah,
they went on to talk about climate change. Karina Gould did try and differentiate herself there because she came out and said, "No, I want to keep the carbon tax, the consumer carbon tax." She said she didn't want to go ahead with the April Fool's Day increase that's coming up, but she did say that she wanted to keep it in place. And then she started saying, "I have two children, and I don't want them to grow up in a world that's burning down," or something like that, some sort of crazy extremist language like that isn't borne out by any evidence
I think
anywhere ever. But she still went ahead with that. And then she also said, which I found quite interesting, which was an attack on Freeland and Carney, I think. She said, "We're not going to win this election by being conservative light. Like, we have to stick to our liberal values." So I
uh,
think that was one of the jibe that
I
that
think
was evident there.
I think she's like like really not a serious candidate. I'm not sure how she even raised the $350,000, which is puzzling. And Freeland and Carney, obviously the front runners in that, and like the mild mannered Frank there. I think he needs to raise his thoughts more, and see what he does tonight, and then Ruby Dalla obviously squashed from even having a voice.
Yeah, appeal's also been rejected, hasn't it, very quickly?
Yeah, that was quick. Um, Then the NDP, Jagmeet Singh, says that elections come. We talked about that yesterday. He's preparing his team for an election. He's got 500 grand to spend. And here's the ad. You got to watch this ad. Yeah. Let's run that.
Been raised to be a politician. Never dreamed of becoming one. I worked for minimum wage to take care of my family when my dad was sick, and made it out of law school to see the system only works for those at the top. So I got in the ring to take on the powerful few and fight for you. It's time for someone in your corner, especially when times are tough. I won't back down. I won't stop fighting for you. I'm ready.
Tough guy. That's what
How's that?
that's clearly what he wanted to do to that guy on Parliament Hill that
Uh,
heckled him that time.
so, so those types of ads, the ad's all about him, right? And it just seemed like a promo ad for Jagmeet Singh as opposed to a party ad and what the NDP is going to do. It was all about him. It wasn't even about his party, or like this is what the NDP is all about. This looks like he created an ad for himself and is using NDP money to kind of promote Jagmeet Singh.
Yeah, definitely. And that's, I would say, we're talking about Singh, so I won't linger on it, but that's also true of Polyev and the Conservatives. All of their ads are just about Polyev, really. It's like, look at this guy and him talking about growing up in Calgary or whatever. But yeah, I mean, Jagmeet Singh, I mean, are people not sick of hearing politicians say things like that? I worked for minimum wage. Okay, most people have.
Yeah.
Most people have done that.
I
You
worked for
work for
less
minimum
than minimum
wage for
wage. I
like
worked for
5 months
less.
or something like that, and
Yeah.
now you make $300,000 a year. Like, shut up. What are you talking about? Who's still swallowing that kind of thing? Who wants to hear that? You know what I mean?
Yeah. I just like I find the ad a bit self-serving. Like even if he doesn't win his seat back, which doesn't look likely, he's got himself a promo ad that he can start his next podcast or something. Maybe that's what you and I
Yeah,
need to do. We need to do an ad like that to get more viewers and that.
just have a fight. Let's have a fight
Yeah.
in a ring.
Maybe you and I can fight or something.
Yeah, we'd probably be in a similar sort of class, wouldn't we?
Weight class,
I'm not sure what it would be,
the old guy
middleweight or something.
versus the young guy. I don't know.
Well, we saw that, and that did very well, didn't it, with Mike Tyson? You could be Mike
There you go.
Tyson, and I'll
There
be
you
the
go.
other guy.
There you go. Well, we can get Jagmeet to train us.
Yeah, I'm
Uh,
sure he would.
Not all Americans are bad people. Diners treated to a free breakfast in Windsor, Ontario Cafe. That was somebody said they apologized for being an American there and bought the people in the diner some breakfast.
Really, really weird behavior, that, isn't it? And I've seen this before. Americans can be like this because obviously their country is at the center of the universe, and I think a lot of them do kind of feel bad, don't they?
Yeah,
And we saw stuff like this during the first Trump presidency where people would make these sort of crazy gestures. But I mean, I don't think there are any Canadians that blame individual Americans for this madness, you know? I think most Canadians are sensible enough to realize that it's Donald Trump and his acolytes, and that he's doing this, which is possibly even more important, he's doing this against the wishes of the majority of the American people, I would say. I would say the majority of the American people don't want to harm Canada. They want to be friends with Canada.
yeah. And then for some, regret is part of parenting. They want prospective parents to hear the stories. You put that in there. I'll let you talk on that.
I just find it interesting that the CBC, you know, which has limited resources, you'll often hear them complain about how they need more resources. But they've devoted quite a lot of effort and time here to writing an article about how miserable some people are that have children. And they to back up this story, they interviewed a TikTok person, some woman that makes TikToks
Yeah,
from the US.
yeah,
Very, very strange editorial decision. And I just thought when I read this, I just thought it's important to contextualize this. Canada has uh, um, a sort of fertility rate catastrophe crisis ongoing right now, where you know the birth rate's it's below 1.4, I think, or the fertility rate, I should say. the lowest it's ever been. And if you just project that kind of a fertility rate 20 years, 40 years, 60 years into the future, it means that the population will just die out, basically. There won't be any Canadians left. I mean, it is literally an existential crisis. It threatens the existence of Canada.
It is. It
And
is.
they don't talk about that in this story. They just talk about, sometimes it sucks to be a parent because,
uh,
you want to go on vacation and you can't because you got kids. It's like, okay,
It is a
cool
weird story.
story.
It is a weird story for sure. In that it's like convincing people that, oh no, you don't want to have kids. They're just a pain in the butt. But I mean, that's kind of like a basic human urge, is to procreate. It's kind of built into us, and that's how we're still here on this planet.
Yeah, and I would say a lot more valuable in the grand scheme, and just even on a personal level, but also from a kind of national level, a lot more valuable to have children than to go on vacation to Mexico or something like that. I mean, there are much better things in life than going on holiday, and having children is just one of them. But I just thought, as a journalist in this, I've been in this trade for too long, many years. They didn't have anybody to interview. There's no story going around. It's not like Justin Trudeau has said something about this, or it's not in part of the national discussion. They've pulled it out intentionally. They've gone looking for it, and they've had to go to a TikTok user in the United States to write this article. What that tells me as a journalist is they just really wanted to write this article. So they looked for someone, and that's what they found. Some randomer on TikTok. So, like, really desperate attempt to write this article to kind of promote ultimately antinatalism in a
Yes.
country with a population that is dying out at an extremely rapid rate, and a terrifyingly rapid rate.
So the
Just seems to
question.
be pretty stupid.
So the question is, was it just the journalists themselves that are trying to make themselves feel better because they decided not to have children, or was it something driven by the CBC itself?
Well, I imagine that they have editors at CBC. Well, in fact, I know they do. So you would think a story of this kind would have to go through an editor. It'd have to be pitched in a news meeting or something like that. So yeah, I would say it's been approved of by editors. But I mean, there's a place for all kinds of stories, but it just seems odd that when they have very limited resources, again, as they say themselves, and at a time where Canada is in desperate need of people to have more children, not less, where people are having fewer children than they've ever had in history,
Uh,
why would you write this article? Why would you go out of
well,
your way to write this article? And like I say, I have to emphasize, it's not like it's a newsworthy story. If it was newsworthy, we would have covered it. If like, let's say Jagmeet Singh, Justin Trudeau, whatever, King Charles, somebody in some way connected to Canada had said, "Oh yeah, lots of people regret having kids." Okay, then now that's a news story. That's in the public arena. It's ready to be discussed. But that isn't what's happened. A journalist has gone desperately crawling around the internet to try and find somebody to interview, to write a story about how much it sucks having kids. It's
well,
just surreal.
the CBC, like they're asking, or they've been, Pascal St. Onge, the Heritage Minister, said they should double their funding. And there's another report out that says that CBC reporters must fight climate change by riding bicycles to news stories. And meanwhile, their upper brass flies around the world in junkets, while they're telling their reporters to start riding bikes in CBC's effort to fight climate change. Well, maybe don't double your budget. That would help.
Yeah, or maybe read the IPCC reports into climate change and emissions and discover how immensely stupid you are for thinking that the entire country of Canada can make a difference to climate change. Never mind a few people riding bikes in Canada. For God's sake, read the reports. That's all I have to say to such people.
That's absolutely mind blowing. Canada's first tooth and eye surgery could restore a North Vancouver. This is an interesting story you pulled out as well. This one is worth talking about. A blind BC
Yeah,
man could see again.
yeah. I mean, this really is mind blowing. For once, that's actually an accurate description about how they put a lens into a tooth or they extract a blind person's tooth, put
Yeah.
a lens into it, and then embed that lens tooth combination into the cheek of the patient, so on the inside, like in the tissue.
Yeah.
Then they let it grow for a few months. Then they remove that and put it in the eye, or they sew it onto the eye, and that can be connected up to the brain, I guess. And here presto, you can see again. That's the theory
Wild.
anyway, which I just think is really awesome, isn't it? That's amazing.
Absolutely wild. Absolutely wild. Well, I'd like to see if that works. And then we talked about this a little bit already. The White House official, this is the White House official pushing to expel Canada from the Five Eyes intelligence group. And that's a Financial Times exclusive. So there's not much more than that article right now. So
He
and
also denied it. The guy, Peter Navarro, is the person that we're talking about, and he denied it. Said I didn't say that. That would be stupid.
I think it would be too. I mean, Canada, again, the largest unprotected border is between Canada and the United States. So there you go. And in more bad news for some of Canada's industries, Irving Paper says it's going to shut down 50% of its operations in New Brunswick because the power rates are just too high.
I have to confess, I don't really know much about New Brunswick's energy mix,
Yeah,
so I don't know where they're getting that from. But I mean, you'd think that they would be connected to Hydro-Quebec, which has famously affordable energy. But I don't know. I guess I'll have to read up on that one. Must confess my ignorance.
There you go. And then you did this next story in here. Federal blueprint for prosperity. Ottawa can save $10.7 billion a year by eliminating 8 inefficient spending programs.
Yeah, among them, $1.7 billion to certain news organizations. Not ours,
We
obviously.
get zero, just
But
to
yeah,
be sure. We get the portion that we get of this $1.7 billion is zero.
it's very interesting though when I mean, this is $10.7 billion, and they say that this is like really the whole point of this Fraser Institute article or report or whatever is that this is really easy. This is like low-hanging fruit, basically, they're suggesting, because these are all inefficient. And it is interesting to see. I mean, a lot of these are quite controversial as well. I mean, that journalism support is extremely controversial. It's many Canadians are very unhappy about that. And then the EV mandate, that's another very controversial one. The
Yeah.
2 billion trees is also controversial in its own way, because a lot of people say that it's an impossible target to reach. But I mean, it's kind of like, I guess it's going to be looked at as a menu for a potential Conservative government, I guess, for what they could chop.
Yeah, we did that yesterday. The National Post put out a thing and says, "Where's Canada's Doge?" And we talked about maybe Kevin O'Leary. We were pitching for Kevin O'Leary to take on the job here in Canada. But I mean, I think we definitely need more accountability for how our tax dollars are spent. Canadians work damn hard for that money, and then they should know where it's going. Like, and again, one of the reasons that this government was prorogued was that they didn't want to release those documents for where $200+ million was spent on a green fund. That allegations are that the environment minister's companies may have received some of those monies. And I don't think
Yeah,
we're
and
ever going to find
that's the
out.
least of it.
And I don't think we're ever going to find out all those money-related scandals until we get a change in government. So if people don't ever want to know what happened with the Wees charity, what happened with the ArriveCan app, what happened with this green slush fund, and we could go on for a long time, then just just have the same government, because they'll probably never release those documents, because they'll say it's not in the national interest, or it's not a time to do it because these are dangerous times because we're at war with the United States and all these things that they use. Instead of just, again, this Liberal government, one of their main things they ran on when they first got elected was transparency and accountability. And I would say that they did very little of that.
I'd say that's one of the areas that they've been criticized most on. And when I say criticized, I mean by kind of neutral organizations and associations and whatnot, rather than just by opposition parties. They've been attacked by lots of groups who are interested in transparency. So it's definitely an area that they've struggled with. Yeah.
Struggled? No, they didn't struggle with it. They just blatantly won't be transparent or accountable.
Well, I was trying to be nice. Trying to be nice to our liberal
Like
friends.
it's not.
Christia is obviously listening. We want to make sure that she's not too upset.
I mean, yeah. I mean, it's blatant. I mean, it's not like, I've seen some of the documents, and when they actually ask for some of those documents, and the redactions there, and they might as well just give them a blank piece of paper instead of wasting all that black ink.
Which is probably made from oil, so it's definitely fossil fuels abuse.
There you go. So let's move on to markets. Gold, market's off in general today. Like gold is off below that $2,900 US mark. And I think it just bounced back over that just now. But yeah, so markets are definitely, having a bit of a break here. And then Bitcoin got hammered pretty good, actually. And, we talked about that yesterday. Is it going to go down and fill that gap, or is it going to go up? I still think that it has room to go up, but down quite a bit this morning, 87,000, right? And if you see how that shoulder's go to the next chart there, Rommel. You can see how that looks like a support level there. So it's got to bounce off that, or it might even go all the way back down to that like that $70,000 level there before it starts its next uptrend. So there you go. Markets are not always what you think they will be, because that's if they did exactly what you expected, everybody wouldn't have to work. There you go. Canadian dollar. Again, down as well. So, and playing with that 70-cent mark there right now, right? So actually just below the 70-cent mark right now today. So there you go.
I guess that's a response to Trump's latest blathering.
Yeah. And then in our AI world, and I tried it out this morning, Grok 3 now talks. Grok 3 found its voice. You and I have both been using ChatGPT for a while, and you can actually have ongoing conversations with ChatGPT. But Grok, I tried it out this morning, definitely a bit of a sense of humor in there with Grok 3. Yeah, kind of like its maker, right? Kind of like, so you got to try it out. So it's on the app. It's available to everybody right now. You can download the app for free. It's called Grok. And then you can, I think on the top left, rightish or something, there's the voice app, and you can start talking. If you need a counselor, there you go. Grok 3 can be your counselor. You can ask it questions. And I know that my daughter uses it all the time now. Even if she's cooking and making recipes, she'll say, what do I do about this? And what do I do about this? And she's actually having conversations with it while she's making cinnamon buns and stuff like that. So I don't use Google much anymore. I know she doesn't use, and yourself?
Well, it's just because, like, when I search for something on the internet, I usually want an answer. I want to actually I want to actually get my answer. And Google, for about 5 or more years now, has not been able to provide answers, as most people have said. They've left themselves very vulnerable to this transition now to AI, haven't they?
Yeah, I mean the thing is that it definitely, like the thing about like Google, like say if you have something you're looking at, even a vegetable for that matter, like a vegetable you haven't cooked with before, you'd have to go find, like, describe it to Google to search for it. But with Grok or with ChatGPT, you can just take a photo of it with your phone and say, what is this and what kind of recipes, and it'll give you everything. It'll tell you the nutritional value of it. It'll tell you some recipes to use with, or you can do that with anything that you're about to eat. You can take a picture of the package and say, should I eat this? And I think once it said to me, if you got to ask, you shouldn't eat it, right?
Wise words.
And like if there's a bunch of words in there you can't pronounce, maybe don't put it in your mouth. If there's 10 of those things or chemicals that are like, more than words that you can't pronounce.
RFK Jr. would approve.
Yeah, I mean, a lot of our health issues are related to the amount of chemicals we put into our mouth, for sure. And maybe less would be better. And here's the next part of it. You put this one in here. ChatGPT More than a quarter of Canadians, 28%, say they consider our artificial intelligence systems like ChatGPT to be reliable sources of information. Like I said, I know quite a few people now that use it and are relying on it. And I also know a young doctor that uses it, and he said it's just amazing, like the information that you're getting from it. So again,
Yeah.
you can start to use the tool, or you can pretend that you don't want to, but there's a lot of people that are using it, and you get some distinct advantages from using it.
Yeah, I'd say my best advice to anyone that's trying to actually learn something through AI, or at least ChatGPT, which is the one that I know, is don't don't kind of take it as 100% accurate on the first response. Like you have to challenge and you have to keep prodding it, even if it's an area that you don't know about. Keep asking questions, and you'll see that it often corrects itself. But the problem I would say is don't just like ask a question about like I don't know, like Chinese cinema or something, and expect it to give you 100% accurate answers. Like you have to kind of treat it like a seminar almost, or like a symposium or something like that. You have to keep prodding it, I'd say, before you get it to be more accurate. And then you can also just say source. Just say the word source, and it will give you the links of what it's basing its response on. And then you can go and check yourself. But yeah, I'd say don't just take it like don't take it immediately as accurate. You have to kind of work with it a bit.
Agreed. And then it also learns and it works on, if you turn on all the things, it works on your past conversations and that, it understands you. And if you ever need somebody to pump your tires, you know what I mean? Some people, like, if you don't get compliments enough, you can actually ask it as one of your first things in the morning. You can actually set it to program, and you can say, "Can you pump my tires?" And it does a heck of a job of pumping your tires.
It will also, I found this quite interesting. It will also estimate your IQ if you've been using it for quite a while. And I
Tried
mean that
that
might
one.
pump your tires, so it might not, but you can you can get it to estimate.
There you go. If you get it to saying, and just like, sadly, I don't think I want to share that with you because you just get angry.
The number is too low. I can't use that number. It's too low.
Or it says, the Grok might say this to you. Do you really want to be upset today? Anyway, in our EV segment, this is just a little eye candy for you. This is one of the larger light shows that are available if you happen to own one of these cars. And we're going to play this. We won't play the whole thing, though. But go ahead.
Tesla Light Show, commencing in 3, 2, 1.
That's probably good wrong. There you go, a large light show. If you are bored and you have a car and you want to take it to the light show, you know how people go to car meets all the time, you know, classic cars and all that kind of stuff. And now you have these car meets that are in the dark, and you can put on a light show.
How does that work? Does somebody have the kind of like the motherboard? Somebody got the master key to
No,
make
like
that happen, or
the cars coordinate with each other. So
right. So there's nobody directing it to decide on the pattern.
no, you just pick the song and then it does the thing. It actually works off of the
Wow.
song.
And they chose Insomnia. Why not?
There you go. And then you've got an EV article here by the MEI saying that
Yeah, ideas for a more prosperous society. Who doesn't want that, eh? Who doesn't want a more prosperous society?
there
But
you
they
go.
just say what a lot of people have been saying, which is the EV mandate's not very clever. EVs are more expensive, and they're estimated to be more expensive in the future as well. It estimates that in 2026, the average EV will cost $6,720 more than an ICE vehicle. And if you want a bigger one, like an SUV, they say the difference would be more like $11,500 between EVs and ICE. I mean, there are reasons for that. We've discussed that many times, haven't we? It's because the cheap end of the market is basically entirely in China, and they're banned. You might as well say that they're banned from Canada, aren't they, in effect? So
Yeah.
the only EVs that we have access to are the higher end ones, like Tesla. But anyway, I mean, the gist of this is it's going to hurt people it's going to hurt lower income people basically, and that it's not shrewd, it's not a clever
And
thing to do.
I think the bigger problem right now with these mandates is that if they keep them here in Canada, because they've been taken away in the United States, is that auto manufacturing in Canada will cease to exist. They will leave Canada and they will go to the United States completely and Mexico, and we won't have auto manufacturing. And that is one of the big things in Ontario. I mean, it's the only province that has auto manufacturing.
I think Quebec contributes as well, yeah.
Oh, do they? Oh,
But
there
yeah,
you go.
basically those two.
There you go. But I'm just saying, if Stellantis has already said it's leaving or is left, which is the Dodge, Chrysler, Jeep family, but Ford and GM too, and even Jim Farley, the CEO of Ford, says they're trying to make plans right now, even if these tariffs come into play, and Canada will not be an auto manufacturer. And then Tesla is a North American auto manufacturer, and if they're going to double the tariffs on Teslas, like that's the end of Tesla here in Canada too, really, right? So then what? And they already have tariffs on the Chinese EVs, and if the auto manufacturers leave from the legacy ones, and I don't know what are we? I guess. Well, Stephen Jabot says we shouldn't have roads. He doesn't want to invest in roads. So there you go. Back to the
Well, speaking of the Liberals,
bicycles.
they've given Air Canada, part of that $5 billion or whatever it is to devise a high-speed railway between Quebec City and Toronto. So maybe Air Canada can also do cars. Apparently,
Well,
they're
I would suggest,
multi-skilled.
and I just go out on a limb here, that Air Canada should focus on getting people to their destinations on time instead of focusing on railroads.
It's a very funny one, but I mean, if they're going to diversify, let's see them make a Cybertruck.
Yeah, here you go. And in the good news department, and the meme, here you go. Elon Musk may have fired Donald Trump because he didn't respond to that email.
It's so I don't think this reflects particularly well on the US government or on the presidency or anything really, this email situation, because in the email, I've seen the email itself, and it doesn't really say anything, does it? It just says, what have you done over the last week or something.
Well, I think if you look back a bit, it's Elon just reusing a tactic he used when he bought X or Twitter or whatever it was called. He did the same thing there, and he said, print out all your code that I think it was 3 months. He said, print out all your code for the last 3 months and bring it to me and show it to me. And if you don't have anything to show me, don't even come to the meeting because you're fired. And he got rid of 80% of the staff.
But he hasn't, on that email, what I was going to say was, he didn't say anything about being fired in the email.
No.
He said that on Twitter, which I just find that a little bit odd, because it's like they haven't been, they haven't actually been warned that they're going to be fired, these people, except on Twitter. So it just seems a little bit messy. It seems a little bit sort of dysfunctional right now. It's certainly not. It's not what you associate with the US government. The US government's supposed to be very competent and like sleek and efficient, isn't it? I mean, I know that's not necessarily true, but it's supposed to have that reputation, and this just makes it look like a mess. It just makes it look stupid, I think.
So what they've been saying is, on the other side of that, is they've been saying that there's a lot of people that have had government jobs that actually aren't, that have a second job and they're actually working. And then the new appointee for the small business administration in there toured her office and showed that there was nobody there. And she said, well, we expect the small business people to be at their jobs. And here it is, the SBA is not, the employees aren't coming to work.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, America, it's not only America, it's certainly true of Canada as well, but America has quite a lot of these kind of like welfare schemes. I mean, the US military to some extent is like a welfare scheme, isn't it? Like, they just have so many people that are just crap and don't really do anything, but it's just a way to keep the unemployment figures down and to stave off, revolution or something, or disorder on the streets of America. And I think for the middle classes, a lot of federal government jobs are just that, aren't they? They're just like it's just a welfare scheme. That's true in Canada, definitely true in Canada. But I think that we're not in a time where that's going to be accepted anymore, I guess, with the Trump presidency. So yeah, I mean, these people who've been gaming the system, that they really should they should be shunted out of their jobs, shouldn't they? It's quite
Well,
ridiculous that.
you and I have talked about this relentlessly and saying that we expect young men and women to join the Canadian military for, just over $37,000 as a starting wage, and expect them to go put their lives on the line and actually, ask them to kill other people based on orders. And then we have bureaucrats that are making, six figures, and they don't want to go to work because they feel that the office is an unsafe environment.
Yeah, and I would say they can't justify their job in the same way that a soldier can. I mean, a soldier's probably the most obvious job in the world that you could list. Like they protect the country. Okay. That like gets a big tick, doesn't it? It's like
Oh.
they get a big they get the green stamp for that. But then a lot of these people for the federal government have the most obscure, bizarre jobs, and it's very, very difficult to try and justify. It's difficult just to justify the job. Never mind to justify it being like $150,000 a year or something. It's I think they've had a good run, a lot of these people, but maybe there is a reckoning coming. And if it's not through a Doge-like system, then it'll probably be through AI, I think.
Yeah, and then again, the lowest paid soldiers in most militaries are the ones that are asked to make the most sacrifice as well.
Indeed, yeah, they're the pointy end, aren't they? They're the ones that go in
They
to
are
battle
the
if we
they
ever
are the
get there.
they are the tip of the spear. I did two good interviews yesterday, the third year anniversary of the Ukraine war. One with Denis Storchuk. It's on Kelowna now. You can go watch that. And he runs the Facebook group here, the Friends of Kiev. And then also I did another one in the afternoon with Helena, and I'm not going to pronounce her name properly, so I won't. Helena and Kate, and they were more on the humanitarian side. They're trying to run it. They're trying to get certified as a charity here in Canada, and Helena did share her personal experience of the first day of the war, about being woken up with the bombing and that, and then her parents woke her up, and then they shipped her out of the country, I think the next day or the day after that. And her parents are still there. Her dad is of military age, and I think he serves in the military as well. So,
I mean, it's hard to imagine that, isn't it? Being like woken up in the middle of the night, but
yeah, she said
it
her
has happened many times in history. It's very interesting to
yeah
hear it
her
now in our
life
time.
her life changed immediately from that. And then my mother had the similar type story where she was in the university, and then also in the Olympic program for fencing, and then the Hungarian Revolution, and then she escaped the revolution after the Russian tanks rolled in, and was labeled a terrorist from her country for fighting the Russian tanks for like 20 years. So it's
Terrifying. Yeah.
a weird, wacky world sometimes. But we do thank you for watching Kelowna Now. We're going to try and be on every morning at 9 a.m. weekdays. So if you like what you see, like to see comments, you can also follow us on X, TikTok, YouTube. And if we could one day they didn't talk about Bill C-18 last night. Nobody brought that up. They didn't allow us to ask any questions. So if they will repeal Bill C-18, so that we can get our Facebook and Instagram back. One of the few, are we the only country other than China that doesn't allow us to have Facebook news organizations to be on that social platform?
Well, I'm sure like North Korea, they don't have it at all in North Korea, do they? But in terms of like open countries, it's only Canada. Yeah, it's the only one in the whole
In the
the
free
whole kind
world,
of
right? In the free
liberal
world,
world, the free world. Yeah.
we've seen 3 news organizations fail here in the past week, and then we want to double the funding for CBC. So it seems like this government only wants one news organization in Canada, and if they're all good with that, then there you go. If you
And
want,
by a pure coincidence, that happens to be a news organization that's quite friendly to the ideas supported by the Liberal Party. So I mean, that is a remarkable coincidence, I must say. Somebody should investigate that, I think.
Well, they're the ones with all the money. They can investigate themselves instead of doing stories on
Yeah,
why
I'm
you
sure
shouldn't
they will.
and why you shouldn't have children. There's that story too, right? So
Yeah, excellent
anyway,
stuff from the
the lead,
CBC.
the English speaking leadership debate goes tonight. We'll see if it's a little more like a debate tonight, or if it's just, you know, basically like three friends having wine and then the uninvited guest Frank there, trying to make a bit of a disturbance. Let's be frank, Frank. Let's ask some tough questions tonight. Like, here's a good question for you, Frank. Ask why, if the Liberal Party is pushing to support Canada, why the former chairman of Brookfield Asset Management moved their company headquarters to New York recently, and ask why they're raising like billions of dollars in the U.S. and not here in Canada. Those are good questions.
Somehow I think they won't be asked, but yeah.
That's a question I would ask if I was there. Anyway, maybe I can ask Ruby if I can get in there. If they can use her $350,000 to sub in. She could tap somebody in. Anyway, there you go. There you get some jokes and humor. We do thank you for watching Kelowna Now.
We don't just report the news. We live here too. We're your neighbors, bringing you stories that matter to all of us. No government funding, no outside influence. Kelowna Now, local, independent. News